Okay, let's dive in. We're tackling something pretty fundamental today about the AI systems that are, well, everywhere now.
Hmm.
And it's this kind of core tension. We rely on them more and more, these incredibly powerful tools.
Yeah, they're becoming deeply embedded.
But honestly, it often feels like looking into a black box.
Right. Unlike, say, traditional software.
Exactly. With old school software, you can follow the code, trace the logic. But with these advanced AIs, how they get from A to B, it's often a mystery.
It really is. And think about the stakes. These systems aren't just playing games.
No way. They're involved in huge financial decisions, shaping the news feeds we see, even creeping into healthcare diagnostics.
But the actual why behind a specific output, often it's just unclear.
That contrast you mentioned, it's fascinating. Click a button in normal software, a specific function runs, you kind of know what to expect.
Predictable. Understandable, usually.
But with these newer generative models,
Yep.
the ones creating text, images, all that stuff,
Yeah, the ones learning from vast amounts of data.
the link between what goes in and what comes out is just way more complex. And sometimes even the engineers who built them are a bit unsure.
That's often the case, yeah.
It's-
It's not always straightforward.
And this leads us nicely into some thoughts from Dario Amodei. He wrote this blog post, The Urgency of Interpretability.
He's a big voice in this space, co-founder of Anthropic.
Right. And he's watched AI grow from, this relatively contained academic thing to what he now sees as a major global issue, economically, politically, you name it,
And one of his core arguments really stands out,
which is.
that AI progress,
Mhm.
it feels almost relentless, like a force of nature, almost unstoppable in its core momentum.
So if we connect that to the bigger picture, he's not saying, hey, let's just slam on the brakes, is he?
No, not at all. His point is more nuanced. It's about steering.
Steering. Okay.
He believes that while the fundamental tech will likely keep advancing, we do have choices. We can influence the priorities.
Like what gets developed first?
Exactly. Or the order of capabilities, the kinds of applications that get the most focus and resources.
Okay. That makes sense. He also mentioned being more optimistic in the past about how AI might help democracies.
Yeah, there's been a shift in his focus, it seems.
And now he's talking about this, what did he call it? A tantalizing possibility.
Ah, right, interpretability.
Yes, the idea that maybe, just maybe, we can figure out how these AI minds work before they become, overwhelmingly powerful.
Which would be a game changer.
Totally. Think about it. Instead of waiting for an AI to mess up and then trying to figure out why,
Which could be disastrous.
we could potentially understand the risks during development, see problems coming.
It's shifting from being reactive to being preventative, proactive even.
That feels hopeful, definitely, but urgent, too, given the speed everything's moving at.
So let's pin down this term interpretability. What does it actually mean in this AI context?
Good question. Fundamentally, it's about knowing exactly how the model reaches its conclusions.
Like, why that specific word in a sentence?
Or how an image system zeroes in on, say, a cat versus a dog.
And, maybe even more importantly, why they sometimes make mistakes. Why the errors happen.
Yeah, and Amodei brought up this great analogy from his co-founder, Chris Olah,
Ooh.
describing these big AI models as being more grown than built. I thought that was brilliant.
That's a really good way to put it, like nurturing a plant.
Kind of. You set up the conditions, you provide the data, the sunlight, and water.
You guide the training process.
But the intricate internal structure, how all the connections form, that just emerges. It's often surprising and really hard to map out completely.
Yeah, we're not meticulously designing every single neuron's connection like we might design circuits on a chip.
Exactly. It's not built in that traditional engineering sense.
And that grown, not built idea really gets to the heart of why interpretability is so hard.
How so?
Because these models learn complex patterns from enormous data sets, right? The internal logic, the connections they form, humans didn't explicitly program those specific
You
pathways.
just learned them.
They emerged from the training process. It's more like, well, training an organism than building a machine piece by piece.
Like understanding the principles of brain function, but not having a perfect map of every single synapse for a specific thought.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. We get the basics, but the fine-grained detail is often elusive.
So, okay. What are the consequences of this? Relying on powerful tools we don't fully understand.
Well, a lot of the anxiety around AI safety stems directly from this opacity.
Makes sense if you can't see inside.
How can you be sure it'll always do what you want it to do? Or, more worryingly, that it won't develop goals that are misaligned with ours.
The alignment problem we hear about.
Exactly. And not understanding the internal reasoning makes predicting or preventing that kind of behavior incredibly difficult.
Right. And it's not just about those big, maybe existential risks, is it?
No, the source material points out more immediate impacts, too. Think about critical industries.
Like finance or self-driving cars, maybe.
Precisely. Places where mistakes are incredibly costly or dangerous, they're often hesitant to go all in on these opaque AI systems.
Because they can't get guarantees about how they'll behave or when they might fail.
Exactly. That lack of certainty about the boundaries of potential errors is a huge barrier. Sometimes it's even a legal blocker for adoption.
Okay, so it hinders practical use too. Now, Anthropic, Amodei's company, they have a take on the timeline for cracking this, right?
Yeah, they seem pretty optimistic, actually. They talk about solving the core interpretability challenge within maybe 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. Okay, but here's the kicker.
The speed of AI development itself.
Right. They've also talked about the possibility of AGI, artificial general intelligence.
That's AI with broad human-like cognitive skill.
And potentially arriving much sooner, maybe even, what, 2027?
Yeah, that's a timeline that's been floated, and that creates this intense pressure.
Huge pressure. Because if you have super smart AI arriving before we understand how it works...
That's a deeply uncomfortable scenario. Amodei himself basically said it's unacceptable for humanity to be totally ignorant about how AGI might work if it arrives that quickly.
It really highlights where the focus has been in AI research, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the source mentions that interpretability work often gets less glamour, fewer resources.
Compared to building the next biggest, most capable model.
Yeah. But you could argue understanding what we're building is actually maybe more important right now.
It's a strong argument. Pushing capabilities is exciting, obviously, but if we can't deploy them safely or responsibly because we don't understand them, what's the point?
Are there any hopeful signs on the research front?
There are. The source mentions something called circuits results. Apparently, this line of research is opening up some really promising new ways to peek inside the models.
Okay, so there's progress, and Anthropic seems to be leaning into this.
They do. Reportedly, they're doubling down on interpretability work.
With a pretty ambitious target, right? Detecting most model problems by 2027.
That seems to be the goal, aligning with that potential AGI timeline.
Yeah.
They're even putting money into startups, working specifically on interpretability.
So it's not just their internal research.
Right, trying to foster a wider ecosystem around it. And to be fair, they acknowledge others are working on this too.
Like Google DeepMind, OpenAI.
Yeah, the other big labs are dedicating some resources. But the sense you get from the source is, maybe it's still not enough.
Like, given the stakes, it needs a much bigger push across the board.
That seems to be the underlying message, yes.
Yeah.
More resources, more focus needed urgently.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've got this situation. AI is getting incredibly powerful, incredibly fast.
Accelerating progress.
But our fundamental understanding of how it works internally is lagging way behind.
This black box problem.
And that lack of transparency creates real issues. Predictability, safety, trust, even just getting these tools adopted in critical areas.
Right. While there's hope on the horizon with interpretability research, these new circuits results.
The clock is ticking because the AI capabilities themselves are advancing so rapidly. It feels like a race.
It really does.
Which brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
Given everything we've discussed, that these advanced AIs are often more grown than built, operating in ways we don't fully grasp, what does that mean for how we approach technology?
And its governance, its regulation.
Exactly. As these systems get smarter and woven even deeper into our lives, do we need a fundamental shift in how we think about them, how we manage them?
What fundamental questions does this raise for you about the future, about our relationship with increasingly intelligent machines that we might not fully comprehend?